So I see an ad, and I saw this one for bikini models, and another one for escort. The escort looked like you escort guests from a hotel, from a club. I didn't understand it, but to me it was just I sit in a car just to be an escort to entertain these people. I'm good in entertaining, so I'm gonna. So I didn't know what kind of entertaining that was. This uncle became so fond of me, like we were so close and all that, until when he saw my innocence. I remember the first time we were sent to a neighbor to. In the village, it's very normal to be sent to borrow salt, to borrow sugar, and all that. So we'd be sent to a neighbor to borrow salt. And at a place where three paths join, so there was a junction, like a trolley junction. We just playing, and we will play and fall and whatever. And so when I fell, he subdued me to the ground. And as you can imagine, the rest is unsightly. That was the first encounter with him where he molested me sexually. So my name is Rosemary Zembi. I love life. I'm an outdoor animal. I'm a social butterfly. I love people. I love children. Just anything in life, really. And I'm a very playful person. I as such, because I love people, I'm a certified professional coach. It's something that I came to embrace much later in life. I grew up in a small village in Kangundo, that's in eastern part of Kenya. Grew up in the village, just like any regular village child. I did everything that most village kids do. I grazed animals, I fetched water in the morning from the river, I fetched firewood, I worked in the shamba, something that I really detested, hated that. But I had to do it to live because that was the life. And I went to a local primary school. Like most children, I don't think that happens today, but it still happens in some parts. I went to school barefoot, torn uniform, lacking food, a lot of things that you can think about as a village girl. But I think the one thing that I remember from childhood is I dreamt a lot as a daydreamer. In fact, most of the times we'd be in the shamba and we would be, digging. We use forks, jembes, or the jembe with a hole. And most of the times I would just hold on to mine and just feeling like this. Because I'm just dreaming about a life that I imagined. Albert Einstein says that imagination is everything. I used to imagine before I knew that quote. And so I used to imagine a life away from the village because we suffered a lot from poverty. We suffered a lot from the community ridicule. I was abandoned before birth. I never got to know my dad to this day. So again, growing up, I had one brother and three cousins that we grew up with. And so we did duties together. It was a mundane of just everyday life where you wake up in the morning, at 3 o'clock we'd go to the river. There was a little bitty hole in the wall, and we'd go line up there to fetch water from 3 o'clock before we go to school. And then we'd come back, and many times we'd come back and we have to take the animals out to tie them where they would be for the rest of the day, then prepare to go to school. My preparation for me was just to get ready and dress up and go to school. Most of the time there was no breakfast. And then we'll be gone. And then again, this was a very normal thing for us when you go to school. And at lunchtime, you're waiting to see whether grandma might come through and bring you something to eat. Many times we never saw anything. And unfortunately, the school that I went to, we were expected to bring packed lunch. Now, when you don't have lunch, you get punished. As if lacking food was not painful enough, you get punished for not having food. So we devised a way with my brother and many boys. I hang out with a lot of boys. So we became very creative. So we would put dirt, like soil or sand, in a container. Like there was a KCC tin, like we used to have powdered milk. We'll collect some of those tins and pack soil in there. So when you go to be inspected over lunchtime, if you brought food, the teacher just grabs your tin and feels there's something, they let you go so that you won't be punished. But realistically, you're hungry and you're starving. So we'd have to befriend friends that can, other kids that had something for us to, share with us. And then when we come back from school, our grandma's farm or coffee farm bordered the school. So many times she would come to work at the farm and carry for us a change of clothes. So after school, we just cross over to the shamba and change from our uniform into that and continue working with her. So that we would walk to tend to the coffee, weeding around it or picking the dry berries, which is what ultimately they'll grind into coffee. If not that, then we'll come back home. We'll go and bring the animals from the grazing fields. We'll go fetch firewood. We'll come back home, and then I will help prepare. We'll help Grandma prepare food. I personally didn't cook much really growing up, but I was there to tell stories and to sing and do whatever, and to fetch water and all that stuff. And then we would also bring the baby cows in. So if we had a cow that we were milking, there was a baby that we have to bring in. So we did that in turns. Like I said, it was my big brother and 3 cousins who were younger. So we did that in turns. And that was just our way. Then when we were lucky, my grandma would have bought us paraffin, so we would study at night. And then while she'd be working in the kitchen in the dark. She sacrificed a lot for us to become the people she wanted us to become, or whatever we dreamt of us for ourselves. But one thing I remember is Grandma was a very forward-thinking woman. She was a widow, widowed very young in her 30s. But she had God by her side. And again, going back, I remember her telling us that God is the light, like brings light. And there was light in our family. She started building a modern house while we were living there. So we were born in an old home that our grandpa built in 1944. So as you can imagine how old that was in the 80s. And then Grandma started, with these community groups like the chamas we have these days and stuff. Whatever she would get, she would go buy material and start building. So she started building a modern house for us. When she pays for school, whatever needs to be paid for school, then she'll bring the rest and develop this house. She built that house on your inside. I remember we used to sleep in a house that didn't have a roof, didn't have doors. So we put like an oil drum, which is tin material, at the door. That was the door. So that way, if anybody tries to move it to come into the house, we would hear it. And then when we're sleeping, we're basically looking at the stars and the moon, and it was beautiful, but it was scary, especially for me. I was a coward. So I would imagine someone is going to creep into my room and all. So we went through that, and she built while we were there until she finished and moved to the house. And fast forward, we were very involved in church. My grandmother gave us a very firm foundation in discipline. Discipline, integrity, and honesty. If you lied, she will beat you up, she will pinch you, she will do anything until you tell the truth. And many times I think she had the wisdom of God where when you're lying to her, she would know you're lying. And she will beat you up until you tell the truth. So because I was scared of the king, when she asked, the first moment she asked if I know I did it, whatever she's asking, I just volunteer and I say, Grandma, I did this. And she wouldn't beat me. So because I was scared of the king, but at the same time, I think it helped me and taught me how to tell the truth from a very young age. So, again, like any child, growing up in a compromised environment, we had a lot of challenges. Or let me say for me, for example, I had a lot of challenges which probably nobody ever got to see or know. Grandma, I remember at one point, I think I was 9 years old, and she had brought a relative to live with us because she served a lot in the community, in the church, in the school, in the community. So she was mostly gone to meetings and committees and whatever. So she had to bring an adult to help us. And that was a family member. So I don't know whether he was paid or he wasn't, but I know he came to be a helper. And he was a relative because he was my mom's cousin. So that was an uncle. And so he came to help us, especially in cooking for us while we were in school, so that when we come home from school, or if we need to be brought lunch, he'll be the one to cook and bring the lunch to us. When we come home, if Grandma is not there, we have an adult living with us. But other than being ridiculed in the community for being fatherless, for being struggling with poverty and hunger and all that, this gentleman also had his own hidden agendas that I don't think anybody knew was up his sleeve. I remember very well he smoked a lot and he drank a lot. Very local, this local brew that is cheap and intoxicating. One thing that my grandma could not stand was smoking. But this guy smoked a lot. And so even after being warned so many times to stop smoking around us, he actually used to send us for those cigarettes. And he would send us at the local kiosk, and the incentive was if you agree to be sent, he will buy you a mandazi, one mandazi, or he'll buy you, there was something we used to call ndanga in my language, I don't know what it's called, but it's really a form of scones. I was so addicted, I think I was as addicted to the scones as he was to his cigarettes. So I would always volunteer anytime to go for the cigarettes, knowing very well if my siblings or my cousins would become like siblings. If they told on me, I know I'll be caned, but I still took the risk because I would get a mandazi. Now, so this uncle became so fond of me, like we were so close and all that. And little did I know that he had any other hidden agenda, because we grew up in a village where we never had heard of any cases of rape or any molestation or any abuse. So we never, or I never, thought anything of him, and I was always very playful. So he would play with me, would play with all of us and all. And I noticed one thing is whenever I'm sent outside the house after dark, because I was a coward, he always volunteers to take me. He always volunteered to take me. And it was okay and it was innocent until when he stole my innocence. I remember the first time we were sent to a neighbor to. In the village, it's very normal to be sent to borrow salt, to borrow sugar and all that. So we'd be sent to a neighbor to borrow salt. And on our way back, I still remember very well that the moon was very, very bright. And at a place where three paths join, so there was a junction, like a tri-junction, we just playing and, we would play and fall and whatever. And so when I fell, he subdued me to the ground. And as you can imagine, the rest. Mother who had nothing else to hold on to other than the faith in God, which at the time for me was elusive. It was I didn't understand what that was as a young child, but after something that I went through, the ridicule in the village, I grew up to realize, oh, I don't have a father. Every child, when they're called, they called by their father's name. I'm called by my grandpa's name. So I was I was very, very eager to know, to find my identity. Who am I really like? And when people say my dad did this for me, my dad will do this for me, who will that dad be to me? So from a young age, I embraced faith. I embraced the identity that God gives us as His children, and I embraced the fact that the Bible says that with God everything is possible. I even have a book that I came to really like. Nothing is impossible. That's by Christopher Reeve, who we know overcame a lot of obstacles. But before all that, I learned to depend on the Word of God. I learned to depend on the belief of whatever my vision, whatever I thought I could become, I believe I could. And it was all against all the odds, and didn't have anything to really pin my success or my successful dreams on. So one thing I knew, being in the village, I didn't see anything that I looked forward to. I didn't see anything that I aspired to become. For example, we worked in the fields, grazing animals and fetching water, fetching firewood, going to dig in the shamba, going to pick coffee, and just too much hard work. And I knew this is not the life that I want. One thing I always, now that I coach, I'm a coach, I've come to realize is sometimes you don't know what you want. But by knowing what you don't want and by avoiding or steering away from that you don't want, somehow your life aligns into what you really wanted, but you did not know it at the time. So for me, I think that was the case. I knew one thing: I did not want to become a secretary. I have nothing against secretaries, but I felt like that was the only career that was tailored and cut out for women, or becoming a housewife, which was like an achievement, or becoming just a regular teacher. Nothing unique about it. I love my teachers because they shaped who I am. But personally, I wanted something different. I didn't know what it was. The one other thing that I knew is I did not want to settle in the village. As a young girl, my grandmother hosted a lot of missionaries who came from overseas. And so as a young kid, my curiosity really like kicked in, and I was always curious. Why do they look different from us? Where do they come from? They always seem to have more than enough. Like they would always come and give us clothes or bring us food like candy, cookies, and things that we had never really seen. And I became more curious. The more I encountered missionaries from, out there, the more I wanted to know about where they come from and why they look different and why they have what we don't have. So I'd ask them where they come from. Now, the language was a problem because they spoke only English. I spoke only my mother tongue, Kikamba, and very little English and Swahili. So I mixed all that and acted out what I wanted to say. So I was very animated from the time I was a young kid. So I would ask them where they come from. And I remember the one thing that was always what different groups, but I would always ask them, where do you come from? We come from overseas. And they'll talk to me like that. We come from overseas. I'm a young girl. I don't understand where overseas is. So in my mind, it became ingrained that there is a place called overseas. So I grew up thinking there's a country or a place called overseas. So that's where I wanted to go, so that I can enjoy this life that these people seem to have. They seem to have everything. And, they look different. So I kind of wanted something different from what I was accustomed to in the village. And that was just a dream, fueled by faith. And of course, hard work. But my hard work was not so academic. It was so much more in dreaming and believing. I believed more, dreamt more than I read. I'll tell you that. And as a teenager, I came to learn that God was a father to the fatherless. And I felt, okay, I belong there. So then why am I suffering? Why am I struggling? Oh, God owns everything. He owns everything. And with God, everything is possible. But I was seeing so much impossibilities. But I chose to have this raw faith where I could take God at His word and really believe anything that His word says. So I believed and dreamt a lot of what I was going to become, and which is what I became. So after high school, again, for fear of being trapped in the village and becoming another village statistic as a teenage mother, I left the village and I went to Nairobi. Overcame a lot. Some hostility with family members, some sexual molestation. I overcame all that. I overcame, or rather, I survived the trap of being trafficked to Saudi Arabia. It was just too much because I was too ambitious, and there's something that I wanted, but I didn't know how to get to it. So I remember when we lived in the Islands, in a very, very little room. It was barely 8 by 9 square feet. And I moved there with my mother. and we lived there, and I would still tell her the kind of dreams that I have, the life that I want. And she used to think I was hallucinating or something like that. But then I wondered, but He raised us to believe in the Word of God, the faith that nothing is impossible with God. So there was that conflict of you taught us this, but when I try to act like that, then it's like something is wrong, because they would ask me, how will you become that? How will you go to overseas? All this time I still did not know where overseas was, or that there are different countries, and overseas really just means abroad. So I sought friendships and relationships of families that had a life that we didn't have. So I consciously decided I will not hang out with poor children. We were poor. I will not seek friendships with poor children. I want friendships with children who, they've come from affluent families where they have maybe 2 cars in the family. Every child seems to have a bedroom in the house. For us, me and my mom were sharing a little room, sharing a single bed of 3 by 6 as a single mother and a young adult. So why would I want to go and hang out with other people who are living just like me? So I wanted something bigger and better. So I befriended such friends, and that didn't sit very well with the family. Because of course, as you can imagine, they were not accustomed to wealth and rich lifestyles. But that didn't stop me. As I explored life and mingled with different people, it started becoming very clear that there is a place for the US, there's the UK and all that. But that, because it was just a dream, and I dreamt of the US, tried it, it didn't work because I didn't have the money to take me to the US. So then I secured a job with a computer company. I didn't have any skills, didn't have any college training, but I befriended the technicians. And through befriending them, I would follow them into River Road, Luthuli, where they're fixing computers. And I watched, and just from observing what they're doing, I learned how to build computers. And I decided I will pay my ticket to the US. I will pay my own ticket. How? I don't know. It seemed like a lot of money, but again, that faith still fueled my dream, and I envisioned anything I could see and envision in my eyes of faith was possible. So I worked hard. and saved my own money, put in fixed savings, fixed accounts and stuff, and saved enough and started applying for schools in the US. And when I was finally accepted, I had saved enough to take me through the first quarter of a year. After that, I did not know how I was going to survive. But again, I figured by faith, if I go there, that faith will carry me past my savings from Kenya. Yeah, that's how I ended up going to the States. I went there to study. But through studying, I ended up working and making friendships and networks that, again, opened up my mind, the way I thought about life. The more I shared my stories, the Americans especially found it very fascinating how I picked myself from the village. But I did tell them that it's you people who came as foreigners. You talk about a place you come from called overseas. Now I know it's called the US. It's no longer overseas. So when I first landed in the States, there's a lot that we don't get to know other than what we see in movies. And without having anyone to hold my hand on the other side, it was a very scary move. More for my family than it was for me. For me, I was ready to dive in and learn how to swim when I'm already in the waters. I had no life jacket, I had no swimming skills, but I was ready for it. So I landed in the States, and there's all these fallacies that we hear. Oh, when you get there in the first 3 months, you're a millionaire. So I got there, well, that was partly in my mind, and it was logic that, yeah, maybe I'll become a millionaire in 3 months or 6 months. But I got there and reality hit. As an international student, there's so much that I did not know that you must do in order to stay in compliance with the American immigration law. So luckily, I didn't go into some of the traps that many international students go into. So I went into the international student office and I befriended the director of international studies. And so she would help me find some of the supplies or things that I needed as an international student, which would help me survive in a foreign country without family. It was hard. It was lonely. I was homesick every day. I cried every day. It was winter. I had never lived in a country, experiencing winter. I don't know anybody. I don't have family. So I would buy a calling card and call home every day. Now, my family didn't have a phone. So I would call a friend and send a message to my family. Or say, on such and such a day, can you tell my brother to be there for me to call and talk to him? Can you tell my grandma to be there for me to call and talk to her, or my mom? Just so I can have a feel of home. It was very difficult the first 2 years. But one thing I never let go, one thing I never gave up on was my faith. Faith is like you're holding on to air. But to you, that air feels so tangible. It feels so real. Because I couldn't imagine falling into some of the traps that I saw there. So, because of my ignorance and was so naive coming from here, I was still very village-like. I saw an ad. We're told America is a land of opportunities and the land of milk and honey. And in a way it is. So I see an ad. At the time I was working in the college where I was attending. So I was working in IT there. And so I saw this ad for jobs. And I saw this one for bikini models. And another one for escort. So I didn't know what that meant. So to me, I thought, oh, modeling in bikinis. I have a beautiful body. I can just go model, get paid. Or escort. What? I'll just escort people? Like you get paid so much money to escort people? I didn't know anything. So I was like, I'm going to sign up for this and quit this college job. And God, listen, you make $400. But I think every night you make $200. So for 2 nights you make $400. I figured if I did just 4 nights a week, that's $800. My rent was $425. Like, I could pay my rent in 2 days. And it's just about 2 hours. It's not a whole day. Then this other bikini thing I could do whenever. So I ran to my boss at the time. Her name was Paula. And she was American. So I was so excited. I went to her. And I told her, look, they have these job opportunities to become an escort or whatever. So the escort looked like you escort guests from a hotel, from a club. I didn't understand it. But to me, it was just, I sit in a car, just to be an escort, to entertain these people. I'm good in entertaining, so I'm going to... So I didn't know what kind of entertainment that was. Paula said, oh, girl, please, do you understand what it means to be an escort? I said, like, she had this puzzled look in her face. She said, number one, to be an escort, basically you're signing up for prostitution. I said, what? She said, yeah. What do you think? These people have been in a club drinking all night. You're going to sit with them in a limousine. Yes, I'm riding a limousine, so I'm excited about that. She said, yes. But anything you can think about a prostitute doing in a room, somewhere in a hotel, is what you'll be doing in that. Like, what? So no, I did not pursue it. because that would go against my morals and stuff. And I was like, and then she told me actually some of them end up being killed by their clients. So that was the end of my dream of becoming an escort or a bikini. So then now that I survived, or that saved me from becoming a victim of prostitution, or maybe eventually death, I continued working in the college. And then while I was working there, I found my first job with Dell Computers. So Dell hired me as a technical support staff. And so I would be working at a call center doing technical support for Dell Computers for a while. And while I was doing that, I was still looking for other opportunities. Um, God is just amazing the way He opened doors for me. I still want to say this. Anytime that you've hoped in God and you put your hope in God, as much as it may look like is wind because you can't grasp it, I know one thing, that faith works. I held on to my faith in that moment when I was working for Dell Computers. And when I found another opportunity with another computer company, they took me on and then they paid me a little bit more. That was another window for me to network and look for other opportunities. So I never gave up. Now, at first, I'll tell you, just like any other foreign student, I went and I signed up for employment in what they call, assisted living. I didn't know what that was. It was taking care of people who are mentally retarded or they're physically challenged, and you're basically babysitting an adult. You are adulting. It's not easy. I did one for 3 weeks, and I told God, really, I did not live my thriving life in Kenya to come and do this in the land of opportunities. So I knew that was not for me. So I quit. I went and took another one, and then where I was, my client was very epileptic. So when they collapsed, I would freak out, and I thought, what if they die in my hands? I can't do this. So from there is when now doors started opening up in the IT field. And when I worked at this other company, it was called CompUSA. When I'd finished my degree, no, I was on my first year of my degree. Then I got a job in a communications company. It was called Verizon. When I went to work there, luckily, I was running out of my reserve, my little savings and everything from Kenya. I basically was now living from hand to mouth. You've heard that? Yes, it's possible in America, even worse. So I'm there and I'm telling God, okay, if I'm really holding on to you by faith, how am I going to continue telling people my God provides and I'm actually struggling now? I got this job with this company, and within that first 90 days of working there, I realized that they had a tuition reimbursement program. They actually would support their staff to go through higher education, college, university, whatever. So I signed up. Now, there's so much that people don't know that I learned my own way because I refused to listen to voices that would take me away from what I'm trying to pursue. I would talk to fellow Kenyans and Africans and tell them, guess what? The company that I'm working for is offering tuition assistance. So actually, I'm going to sign up for them to help me with my college education. I signed up for the tuition, and they approved against what other foreigners would tell me, no, that's only a benefit for Americans. I said, I'll apply and see if I get it. So I got it. I worked from there, and from there I continued growing my career skills. And after graduating, which that company paid for me. So after graduating, then I moved on to engineering, and I went to work for an engineering company. I did procurement, project controls, until during that time I started an organization in Kenya, which I would come home once a year to come and just reach out to the young people and really share my story because I felt like I'm already living a life of testimony that I feel I should share here and come and just give them a little bit of hope, like a little like let them into a little bit of my world out there. After going into prayer and thinking about it and self introspection, 90 days later, that was in 2012, I decided, you know what, I'm going to give it all up. The same way God led me there, that same God will sustain me in Kenya because I've already got my education, I've worked, I have my work experience and stuff, and I want to go back there and I will find a way to establish myself in Kenya. So I left the States after being there 13 years and I moved back to Kenya. So it's so interesting how my life has been. Like, I grew up in the village, I dreamed my way out to the States, I enjoy all that luxury, and then boom, my life is turned around and full circle, I'm back in the village again. So about 10 years ago, my dream to relocate back to Kenya became reality because
I had dreamt of coming to establish a recreational facility or something, a program basically where young people can be empowered to dream their lives out of whatever circumstances they may find themselves entrapped in. And so that's what led me to this, which was predominantly a bush. As you can see, it's still very underdeveloped. And I came to a place that was very thorny, very bushy. All you could see is snakes and some wild animals. And I managed to clear the bush and start to build what would become what we have today, a recreational and educational facility. It's called the Wimberley Place. Initially, I just built an open hall, which would be a training hall. And then I built a storage unit, which had a tin house on the top. And believe it or not, from America to the village and then coming to live in a tin house. That's an irony that a lot of people have never really understood. But I felt like that's a vision I had had for several years. Every time I would come by here during the holidays and I would see a bush, but I envisioned exactly what I was beginning to form. And as the buildings came together, I started feeling like my vision was unraveling. So it wasn't an easy journey. As anyone can imagine, with any form of transition, one of the hardest things is being able to fit into your own culture. You come home, but you really feel out of place. You don't understand the culture anymore. There's a cultural shock. It's like a reverse cultural shock because I didn't expect it. So, when you don't expect it, it hits you harder. And for me, it was no different. First of all, the budgets that I had, which were given to me by people that I trusted in the family, turned out that they were overrated, and I quickly ran out of money. In 6 months, I had sunk everything that I had on the ground, and I had nothing else to show for it. I hardly even had enough to hand out to somebody just for a meal. And so I had to stop my projects and travel back to the States, where I had saved for my retirement. And that was the only other source of money or finances that I could get to help me propel this project going forward. So I went back to the States and liquidated all my savings, all my 401k, which is a retirement program there, and any dividends that I had in my savings, in my shares, and I liquidated that and came back home. But then again, in a few months, in just about a year or so, I ran out of resources again. And one person that I know, or two people that I know that encouraged me the most on this journey are now late. It's my grandmother, Lois, and my mother, Sarah. May they both rest in peace. Because it's the words of encouragement that they gave me. They may not have had much material to give me. But one of the things that I know that they did tell me is that the God who called me into this work was faithful. He was faithful when he took me from the village to the States. And he was faithful when he brought me from the States to here, especially because I came back to Kenya to serve. And there's nothing as significant in anyone's life as service. Many times there's something that I learned from Martin Luther King, that every one of us wants to be famous. But we all cannot be famous, but we all can be significant, because significance comes from service. I thank God for the opportunity to serve in such a plain place, to serve the least of the community, because I was once one of those. And going back to the story of developing these facilities, I remember people would ridicule and laugh at me and say, this is a white people's thing. What is she coming to build here? A library, a recreational facility? That was like a foreign term for many people who didn't understand what recreation is. It's still kind of foreign to many in our country and in our society. But I continued moving forward, and luckily I had invested some pieces of property in Kenya while I was away. And those are the ones that really were able to pull me out of the mud and put me back on track. About 7 years ago, we started hosting youth camps when this place was barely developed. But young people, I've come to find out, they're looking for what we are offering. So many young people looking for inspiration, looking for somebody to dream alongside them. Things that I wish I had when I was a young kid, but because I didn't have it. I love the song of Whitney Houston where I believe the children are our future. My most favorite part of that is where she says, everyone is looking for a hero. People need someone to look up to. I never found anyone to fulfill my need. Such a lonely place to be. So I learned to depend on me. So I learned to depend on myself and my dreams. For a long time, I dreamt things out of the norm. I dreamt about things that I had never seen. I'd never seen anyone in the family do, because again, like the song says, everyone is searching for a hero, someone you can look up to, someone you can go after. I never had any of those. And another thing that has inspired me over the years before I even came back to Kenya to do this, it's very scary. There's an American cartoonist who said, if your dream is not big enough, then it's not scary, it's not big enough. If your dream is not scary, if it doesn't scare you, then it's not big enough. And so I dreamt out this place when I looked like I was out of my mind. And I remembered a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. It says, don't go where the path may lead, go instead where there's no path and leave a trail. I believe what I'm doing today, I came to where there was no path. It was a bush like you can see right behind me. And now what we have is a facility, the only one of its kind that caters to the needs of young people, kids, and even churches and families that are looking for a place to host something like a birthday party, looking for to host something like a graduation party. We've done all that. We've hosted youth camps through Scouts programs, church groups, and school programs as well. And this is something that is done for business, but really more on a non-profit business. It is just for sustainability. You know, I've heard often people say that we wait until we achieve our goals to celebrate. But I believe in one thing, in celebrating small milestones, small achievements. When I started this dream of building this facility, which is called the Wimberley Place, I envisioned it being up and running and completely running in no more than a year and a half or two. As I shared earlier, I kept running into obstacles because I did not foresee those. But I've embraced the champion mindset where you celebrate your small wins towards the bigger win. And so here we are today, 10 years later. We have a facility that is the only one in the area, in the region, and we host youth camps for teens through schools or church youth groups. We also host young kids Scouts programs. We host private events like graduation parties, birthday parties, community activities and organizations, and as well as now we are opening up to corporate organizations that want to do things like teamwork and things like that. And behind me you'll see that we have a playground for young kids. There is not such a facility here, and what I'm seeing today is what I envisioned more than 10 years ago. Granted, I was very aggressive and thought it would come together in 2 years, but now I thank God that 10 years later, I can sit back and bask, and I love being here, enjoying the breeze and the sunset, beautiful, beautiful sunsets and moonlights and all those things, doing what exactly I had envisioned to be doing 10 years ago. If you're a parent and you're watching this, if you're an educator and you're watching this, you're a preacher, you're a pastor, anybody that is involved in service, this is a perfect place, and I look forward to partnering with you on your next program where you're looking to take people out to be equipped and empowered for a better tomorrow. The Wimberley Place, where we are made. Made means making a difference every day. God bless you so much.